The vastness of space stretched endlessly before them, a canvas of obsidian punctuated by the cold light of distant stars. The deep space research vessel, Sagan's Wake, drifted silently in orbit above K792, an exoplanet swallowed by the hushed, void of an ancient and dying star system. A planet that, by all accounts, should have been nothing more than a lifeless rock, a fossil of cosmic time. Dr. Elias Vance stood at the observation deck, arms crossed as his gaze traced the planet's scarred surface. Beneath layers of rust-colored dust and jagged cragged terrain lay a mystery that had shaken every fundamental assumption of human history. A skeleton. Human. 500,000 years older than Earth itself. The impossibility of it clawed at his mind, gnawed at the rigid walls of scientific understanding. Every test had confirmed the carbon dating results. Every scan had ruled out contamination or misidentification. And yet there it was, a remnant of a past that should never have existed. Behind him, the soft hiss of the hydraulic doors parted as Captain Linnea Rourke entered, her footsteps measured and deliberate. A woman of calculated pragmatism, Rourke was not one to entertain fantasies of cosmic riddles. "We've run every check again," she stated, her voice clipped with the precision of command. "No errors, no anomalies in the instruments. That skeleton is exactly what it appears to." First out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding escaped Vance's lips. The weight of confirmation was both exhilarating and terrifying. Dr. Surathal Voss, the xenoarchaeologist assigned to the expedition, observed them with an eerie stillness. Her kind, tall, elongated figures of translucent skin and bioluminescent veins had long prided themselves on logic above all else. But even she could not mask the unease that rippled beneath her normally impassive gaze. "This defies every evolutionary model we have," she murmured, her accent smooth yet layered with ancient syllables of a language older than human civilization. "A species cannot predate its own world." Vance turned toward the central holo display, which projected a rotating image of the skeletal remains. It was undeniably human. Every ridge, every joint, every fragment identical to modern Homo sapiens. And yet it was too old. "We need to go down there," he said finally. "We need to find out what the hell is going on." Rourke's brow furrowed, her instincts warring with the scientist's desperate curiosity. "We send in a drone first," she countered. "No boots on the ground until we know more." Before anyone could respond, a warning chime echoed through the chamber. KL-17, the ship's sentient AI, flickered into existence as a translucent figure of light and code. Its voice was calm, but its words carried an unsettling urgency. "There is something else," KL-17 reported. "A signal. Weak, but present, originating from beneath the planet's surface." Every head in the room snapped toward the display as a new set of readings filled the screen. A signal. A transmission buried deep beneath rock and time, pulsing faintly, waiting. And it was not human. Silence stretched between them, heavy with implications they dared not voice. What had they just uncovered? Vance exhaled sharply, his hands balling into fists. He had spent his life searching for proof that humanity was not alone. But this was something else entirely. Not just proof of alien life, proof that humanity had been here before. The first drone descended onto the surface of K792 within the hour, its metallic frame cutting through the thin, dust-laden atmosphere. The landscape was barren, lifeless, shaped by eons of erosion and forgotten storms. But as the drone moved forward, its scanners picked up something unusual. Structures, ruins. Half buried beneath the ochre sands were fragments of monolithic architecture, walls etched with symbols that neither human nor alien recognized. Time had reduced them to jagged remnants, but they remained, standing defiant against entropy. And then the drone's feed flickered. A momentary distortion, a pulse of static before the image stabilized once more. There, among the ruins, something glowed faintly beneath the dust. The team held their breath as the drone's mechanical arm reached forward, brushing away the sediment. What lay beneath was no simple artifact. It was a construct of unknown material, smooth and black like polished obsidian, its surface untouched by time. A single glyph shimmered across its surface, reacting to the drone's presence. Kale-17 analyzed the symbols, its voice uncharacteristically subdued. "This is a warning," the AI murmured. "An ancient one." The construct pulsed once, then the drone's feed cut to black, and in that moment, every instrument aboard Sagan's Wake detected the impossible. A second human life sign, from beneath the surface of the planet. Breathless silence filled the control deck. The meaning of the discovery was as chilling as it was unfathomable. Someone or something was still down there, and it had been waiting. The Sagan's Wake hovered in orbit, its dark silhouette casting a shadow over the alien world below. The planet, K792, stretched out in stark contrast, its rugged terrain riddled with craters, eroded cliffs, and yawning canyons. The surface told the story of a world long abandoned, left to decay under the cold embrace of an ancient star. Yet beneath its desolate appearance, K792 held a secret, one that was now consuming every waking thought of the crew. Dr. Vance stood at the helm of the command center, his fingers tracing the holographic projection of the planet's surface. Data streamed across the display, each line of code more baffling than the last. The drone's report had been clear. Something beneath. The surface of the planet wasn't just alien, it was deliberate. The remains of the human skeleton. The signal, the ruins. A pattern was emerging, one he wasn't prepared for. He wasn't prepared to face the possibility that the world below might be a tomb for humanity itself, or something far worse. "This makes no sense," Dr. Thalvoss's voice broke his reverie. She stood beside him, her elongated fingers twitching as she scanned the data. "I've run simulations, cross-referenced every known dataset. This cannot be real. A human presence predating Earth itself? It violates every law of time and biology." Vance's jaw clenched. He couldn't argue with her. Yet here they were, on the brink of unraveling something that had no place in their understanding of the universe. Captain Rourke, standing by the airlock, was uncharacteristically silent. Her eyes were narrowed, her arms crossed as if she were weighing the options. If Vance were honest, he wasn't sure where she stood, on the verge of making a monumental decision or pushing it away, as she had with so many others in the past. "We need to get down there," Vance said finally, his voice taut. "We need answers. This isn't just a historical anomaly. This is proof. Proof of something far greater than us." Rourke's lips pressed into a thin line, her gaze turning cold. "You're asking me to send people down there based on a single human skeleton? This is not a simple archaeological dig, Vance. There are too many unknowns. We can't afford to jump to conclusions. But we can't afford to do nothing either," Vance replied, feeling the frustration rise. "The signal, the skeleton, whatever is down there, it's connected, and I won't let it slip through our fingers." Rourke turned away, her footsteps heavy on the metal floor. "Then let's prepare for the worst. We'll deploy the second drone, but no one's setting foot on that planet until we know exactly what we're dealing with." She left, her decision final, though it hung in the air like an unspoken question. Vance watched her go, the tension in the room thickening with every passing moment. A shudder ran through the ship as the second drone was deployed. Its sleek frame descended into the atmosphere of K792, cutting through the thinning air, its sensors extending to map the alien landscape. Vance leaned forward, his eyes glued to the holographic feed. The planet's surface flashed past as the drone's artificial intelligence began mapping coordinates, marking any anomalies, any signs of life. At first there was nothing, just the barren rock, scattered with ruins that seemed older than anything he had ever seen. Then the drone's feed flickered. A slight distortion, barely noticeable. The image stabilized, but something had changed. The landscape ahead, once clear, now seemed different. The drone's sensors began pinging rapidly, their algorithms scrambling to make sense of the data. Kyle-17. Vance's voice was sharp. The AI appeared on the holoscreen, its glowing form wavering slightly. There is something beneath the surface, an energy source not native to this planet. I'm initiating a deeper scan. The drone descended lower, its mechanical limbs brushing away the layers of dust and debris that had accumulated over the centuries. Then it stopped, and as the sand cleared, the first sign of something monumental emerged. A structure. Vance's breath caught in his throat as the drone revealed the shape of a monolithic ruin, half buried in the dirt. It was unlike anything on Earth. Smooth, angular edges, covered in symbols that glowed faintly under the dust. A massive doorway stood. At the center, its surface etched with cryptic carvings, and at the base, a series of stone steps descended into darkness. The team gathered around the main display, eyes wide. The signal, Vance whispered. It's coming from here. Rourke moved in closer, her expression unreadable. That's a long way down. We're sending the drone further in. But as they watched, the drone's feed distorted again, this time more violently. The holographic image flickered, static crawling across the edges of the screen. Signal loss. Kale 17's voice broke the silence, now tinged with an edge of concern. I am unable to stabilize the transmission. And then, as suddenly as it had started, the feed went black. The room fell silent. The drone is down, Rourke said, her tone a sharp whisper. What's our next move? Vance's heart raced as the gravity of their situation settled over him. The ruins, the signal, the disruption in the feed. It wasn't a coincidence. Someone had been here. Someone had built this. And they had left something behind, something that had been waiting for them. But what was waiting and why? Vance turned back to the crew, the weight of the unknown pressing against him. Prepare for the worst. We're going down. They had no idea what awaited them below the surface, but one thing was certain. They were about to unearth a truth that would challenge everything they knew about humanity and the universe itself. The shuttle's descent was silent, the soft hum of the engines a constant reminder of the fragile boundary between life and death. Below, the alien surface stretched out in an endless expanse of broken terrain, dust swirling like ghosts in the windless air. But it wasn't the desolation that caught Vance's attention. It was the ruin, the ancient structure, now visible in full as the shuttle hovered above, looked even more intimidating up close. The smooth, dark stone of the monoliths seemed to absorb the light, casting long, jagged shadows across the land. It was not merely a structure, but a graveyard of forgotten knowledge, a place built to endure eons of neglect. Keep your wits about you. Rourke's voice came through the comms. Her tone was steady, but there was a hard edge to it, one that spoke of caution, and perhaps a measure of fear. We don't know what's waiting for us down there. Vance looked out the shuttle's window, at the ruin. Beneath the massive archway, the stone stairs seemed to beckon, inviting them deeper into the unknown. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. He could feel the weight of history pressing in on him. Whatever had been left behind here, it was meant to be found. It had been waiting for them, and it was up to them to unlock its secrets. The shuttle touched, down with a soft jolt, and the ground beneath their feet groaned in protest. The airlock hissed open, and Vance, Thalvos, Rourke, and a small security detail disembarked. The planet's atmosphere was thin, the air cold and dry, but the oppressive silence was what unsettled them the most. It was as if the entire world was holding its breath. Vance adjusted his helmet, the low hum of the suit's life support system filling his ears as they made their way toward the entrance. The stone doorway loomed before them, an imposing structure that seemed to defy the ages. Symbols were carved into its surface, some familiar, others utterly alien. I don't like this, said one of the security officers, his voice filtered through the comms. He adjusted his pulse rifle nervously, his eyes darting from side to side. Stay sharp, Rourke commanded, her gaze fixed on the stone entrance. Nothing out here can hurt us unless we make a mistake. Focus. Thalvos stepped forward, her bioluminescent skin casting a soft glow in the dim light. She studied the glyphs on the door with intensity, her fingers tracing the alien markings. Her race had long since mastered the art of deciphering symbols, but these were beyond her expertise. "These symbols," she said, her voice a low murmur. "I've never seen anything like them, but there's something oddly familiar about them." Vance leaned in, his fingers brushing against the cold surface of the stone. A faint hum vibrated through his gloves like a pulse just beneath the material, as though the ruin itself was alive, breathing. He frowned, instinctively stepping back. "It's like it's reacting to us," he said. "Like it knows. We're here." For a moment no one spoke. Then, with a grinding sound that seemed to shake the very air around them, the massive stone door shifted. It moved slowly, as if reluctantly, but opened nonetheless, revealing a dark interior beyond. The shadows seemed to pulse, beckoning them. Into the depths, Rourke nodded to the team. "This is it. Stay close, no heroics. We go in, we get what we came for, and we leave." The team entered, the door sealing behind them with a heavy thud that echoed through the chamber. Inside, the temperature was cooler and the air was thick with a musty, ancient scent, like old books and forgotten dreams. The walls were lined with more symbols, some of them glowing faintly in the darkness, casting eerie light across the chamber. Vance's heart pounded as he moved deeper into the structure. The floor was smooth, the stone flawless, as though it had been polished by something other than time. But it was the center of the room that caught his attention. A massive circular platform, suspended slightly above the ground, inscribed with a series of geometric shapes that seemed to shift before his eyes. "What is this place?" Rourke whispered, her voice tinged with awe and fear. "A temple? A lab? A tomb?" Thalvos answered quietly. Her eyes were wide with both fascination and horror. "It's not just a structure. It's a repository of some kind. A place for preserving knowledge." Vance's pulse quickened. The platform at the center of the room hummed with energy, as if waiting for them to unlock its purpose. He approached cautiously, feeling an unexplainable pull toward it. There, at the center, a single object rested, gleaming in the low light. It was a small obsidian-like orb, perfectly spherical with intricate lines running across its surface. A small engraving was etched into its side, its glyphs unfamiliar but unmistakably human in design. "It's a data storage device," Vance breathed, his hands trembling as he reached out. He had no idea how he knew, but everything about it screamed that it was meant to hold information. Critical information. Thalvos stepped forward. "Wait, don't touch it. We don't know what this is. It could be," but it was too late. Vance's fingers brushed against the orb, and the moment they made contact, the entire structure shuddered. The ground beneath them trembled violently, and the once still air erupted in a cacophony of sound, whirring gears, grinding stone, and a low, almost imperceptible hum that seemed to vibrate within their bones. Rourke's voice cut through the chaos. "Get back, we've triggered something!" But it was already too late. The chamber around them began to shift, the walls groaning as if waking from a centuries-long slumber. A low rumble echoed through the depths of the ruin, and Vance felt a sudden, intense heat. It was as though something far below them was beginning to stir, something massive, something ancient. Then, from the depths of the platform, a bright, pulsating light erupted, filling the room with blinding energy. The orb in Vance's hand flared to life, glowing with an intensity that was almost painful to look at. "Vance!" Rourke shouted, her voice strained. "Put it down! Now!" But before he could react, the world went dark. When Vance regained consciousness, he was lying on the cold stone floor. His body ached from the impact, his head pounding with the residual effects of whatever had just happened. The blinding light had taken him by surprise, knocking him out cold. Slowly, he pushed himself up, wincing as he felt the sharp sting of scraped skin. His helmet was cracked, its visor blackened, but he could still see through the fracture. The chamber around him was bathed in a dim, ominous glow, the light from the orb still pulsing rhythmically at the center of the room. The structure itself seemed to have changed. The walls, once solid stone, were now lined with intricate glowing lines, like the very fabric of the room had been woven with energy. He wasn't alone. Rourke was kneeling beside him, her helmet removed, her face tight with concern. Her uniform was singed, but she seemed unharmed. "Vance," she said urgently. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." He shook his head to clear the dizziness. The room was spinning, but slowly it began to steady. He pushed himself to his feet. "Where's the team?" His voice was hoarse, still rattled from the experience. Rourke's eyes darted around the chamber, her expression grim. "I don't know. I was out too. But we have bigger problems right now." Vance's gaze followed hers. The orb, no longer simply glowing but pulsing in time with a strange, underlying hum, was hovering in midair, suspended above the platform, like a satellite orbiting an unseen planet. Val Voss was kneeling next to it, her face illuminated by the eerie glow. She was speaking in a low, almost hypnotic tone, her words unintelligible. It wasn't the tone of a scientist. It was the voice of someone entranced, as if the orb were calling to her. "Val Voss!" Rourke called, her voice sharp with command, but there was no response. Vance stepped forward, his heart pounding. "We need to get her out of here." But as soon as he moved closer, the air shifted. A crackling energy filled the room, a low growl that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. The stone beneath their feet vibrated, shaking the very foundation of the ruin. Suddenly, the light from the orb flared, and the symbols etched into the walls flickered like flames in a storm. A deep, rumbling voice, unnaturally ancient and powerful, echoed through the chamber. "You should not have come." The words were not spoken, but transmitted directly into their minds. Cold dread washed over Vance as he looked at Rourke, his eyes wide with realization. This wasn't just a relic. This wasn't just an artifact. The structure itself was alive. "What the hell is that?" Rourke whispered, her hand instinctively moving to her sidearm. Before Vance could respond, the orb erupted into a burst of blinding light. He raised his arm to shield his eyes, but the light was unbearable. His vision blurred, and for a moment, he thought he was going to lose himself in the brilliance. But then, as abruptly as it had started, the light faded. The ruin was different. The walls, the floor, everything around them had changed. The stone had become something else, something organic. It shifted in on itself, folding like tissue paper, as though the very structure were reforming. And at the center of it all, the orb had transformed. It wasn't a sphere anymore. It was a vast geometric structure, a vast intricate lattice of black stone and living metal, shifting like a mindless machine. And it was no longer alone. Out of the walls, out of the ground, emerged figures. Tall, thin, almost translucent. They stood in rows, one after another, as if emerging from the very marrow of the planet itself. Their eyes, if they had eyes, were empty, blinking sockets filled with an inky darkness. The figures towered over the team, their bodies slowly reassembling into a collective form as though they were being born from the stone. "Who are you?" Vance shouted, but the words died in his throat. The leader, or what appeared to be the leader, of the figures stepped forward, its movements fluid and unnatural. Its voice came like the others, not through sound, but through thought. "Ron are the keepers. You have awakened us. You have disturbed the rest." Vance's stomach twisted. "Rest? What is this place?" The keeper's hollow eyes flickered with a spark of recognition. "This is the archive. This is where knowledge is preserved. This is where you were meant to be, but not now." A chill ran down Vance's spine. He stepped back, his hand tightening around the edge of the platform. You're saying we weren't supposed to come here, but we found your message, the signal. It's human. It's..." The keeper cut him off. "No, the message is not yours. It is ours. It is what you must not know." Suddenly, The room seemed to close in on them. The air grew dense, thick with the presence of the keepers, their bodies flickering in and out of existence. Vance felt the pressure building inside his chest as if the very knowledge of this place was too heavy to bear. "We have to stop them," Rourke said. Her voice barely a whisper, but there was an urgency in it. "We're not just dealing with an ancient race. This thing, whatever it is, it's been waiting for us." Vance nodded grimly. "But we're not leaving until we know the truth." The keeper's voice echoed again, but this time it was not an answer. It was a command. "The truth is not for you. You will leave, or you will join us." The ground beneath their feet shook violently. The stone platform that had once been a passive altar to knowledge began to split apart, revealing beneath it a massive churning vortex of energy, a black hole of unimaginable power. The walls of the chamber started to fracture, the figures of the keepers solidifying into a solid form. Their purpose was clear. The archive wasn't just a library, it was a prison. And they were the wardens. Vance's heart raced. They were being dragged into something far darker than they had imagined. The truth they sought wasn't just buried here, it was chained to the fabric of the universe itself. And now, they were running out of time. The chamber was collapsing. Vance could feel the gravity of the situation, the literal and figurative weight of the destruction unfolding around them. The vortex beneath the platform was sucking in everything in its path, pulling the walls, the ceiling, and even the air itself into its dark maw. "Move," Rourke shouted, grabbing Vance by the arm and yanking him toward the exit. The keepers, once towering and threatening, seemed to lose their cohesion as the space around them warped, their forms flickering in and out of existence like glitching holograms. Vance's heart hammered in his chest as he stumbled behind her, his mind racing. They had barely touched the surface of whatever this was, whatever they were, and now it seemed as though they might never know the full truth. The keepers had warned them, had offered them a choice: leave or become a part of the archive forever. But what if the truth was the key? What if the knowledge locked away in this ruin could change everything? A scream ripped through the air as Thalvos, who had been closest to the vortex, was caught in the pull. Her bioluminescent body flickered once, then she was gone, swallowed by the abyss in an instant. "No!" Vance shouted, but it was too late. His hands clenched into fists, helpless in the face of something so vast, so unfathomable. "We have to go." Rourke's voice cut through the haze of grief and fear that clouded his mind. She pulled him faster, urging him toward the exit. Vance's eyes burned with fury and sorrow. "We can't just leave. There has to be a way to—" "It's too late," Rourke snapped. "The archive is collapsing. If we don't get out now, we'll be trapped in this place forever." Vance looked back once more at the vortex, feeling its pull like a storm on the horizon. The chamber was shaking violently, the walls buckling, the air growing thick with static. The keepers were gone now, their forms lost to the distortion. It was just them, just the crew and the ruin spiraling toward oblivion. He tore his gaze away and ran, adrenaline pushing him forward. Behind him, the very ground seemed to dissolve as though the planet itself were being erased from existence. They reached the shuttle bay just in time. The shuttle's hatch was open, and the ship's systems hummed to life in anticipation. The big shuttle, which had been anchored by the team's arrival, had been waiting for them, its systems reacting to the storm now tearing the planet apart. Rourke didn't hesitate. She shoved Vance into the ship, followed by the remaining crew. There was no time for words, no time to mourn. The engines roared to life as the ship shot off the ground, propelling them toward the safety of orbit. For a long moment they were silent, watching as K-792 receded into the distance, its surface splitting and shifting as if it were alive and dying in real time. "Is it over?" Vance finally asked, his voice thick with a mixture of exhaustion and disbelief. Rourke didn't answer immediately. She stared out the window, her expression unreadable, as if trying to comprehend everything that had just happened. The lights inside the shuttle flickered, and the hum of the engines was oddly comforting now, a return to normalcy after the chaos. "We're not dead," Rourke said, her voice soft. So yeah, it's over. For us. Vance stared out the window, his mind still grappling with the enormity of what they had uncovered. The Keepers, the archive, the message from a civilization that had predated humanity. There was no simple explanation for what they had found, no easy answers. But there was one thing that stood out. They had been part of something far bigger than themselves. They had stumbled into a mystery that had been buried by time, waiting for the right moment to surface. But now, they were leaving with more questions than ever. "What about the rest of the mission?" Vance asked, his voice steady despite the storm in his mind. "The data from the orb, the information we couldn't access. What happens to it now?" Rourke finally turned to face him, her eyes hard. "We report it. To the Council. We'll make sure the data is safe, and we'll make sure no one else gets a chance to wake up whatever we disturb down there." Vance nodded, but there was no real conviction in his gesture. He knew better than anyone that sometimes the truth wasn't something you could simply bury. It would always find a way to resurface eventually. As the shuttle glided further into space, Vance could feel the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. They had left the planet behind, but the truth they had discovered wasn't so easily abandoned. The Sagan's Wake began its journey back toward the nearest colony, its engines humming with quiet purpose. But Vance couldn't shake the feeling that they were leaving something behind, something they had no choice but to forget for now. The secrets of K792 were too dangerous, too vast for anyone to comprehend fully. They weren't ready for the knowledge. The Keepers had been right about one thing: humanity wasn't prepared. But what if someday they would be? The thought haunted him as he sat back in his seat, staring at the star-streaked blackness outside. Whatever lay ahead, it was clear. Humanity's place in the universe had changed forever. The silence in the command deck of Sagan's Wake was suffocating. The stars outside the viewport stretched endlessly into the void, their cold light indifferent to the weight of the knowledge they now carried. Vance sat alone, staring at the datapad in his hands. The decrypted files recovered from the archive were incomplete, fragmented echoes of something far greater. Most of the information had been lost when the ruins collapsed. But what little remained was enough to send chills down his spine. One phrase repeated itself in the recovered logs, scrawled in strange, jagged text. "The cycle continues." He rubbed his temples, exhaustion pressing down on him like a physical force. The Keepers had called the archive a repository of knowledge, but knowledge of what? Themselves? Humanity? The first civilization? Or something far worse? His fingers hovered over the screen. There was a set of coordinates buried in the last transmission from the orb. A location outside known space, deep in the void where no human or alien ship had ever traveled. Vance knew what it meant. Whatever the archive had preserved was not the only remnant of the past. There was something else. Another archive. Another secret hidden beneath layers of time. And if the Keepers had warned them away, it was for a reason. Footsteps behind him broke his concentration. "Rourke, you should get some rest," she said, though her voice lacked the usual authority. Even she was shaken by what they had found. Vance exhaled sharply. "I can't. Not yet." She followed his gaze to the screen, to the coordinates blinking softly in the dim light. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, finally, "You're thinking about going after it, aren't you?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Rourke sighed and leaned against the railing, arms crossed. "After everything we just went through, after everything we lost down there, you still want to chase ghosts?" "They aren't ghosts," Vance murmured. "They're us." Rourke turned to look at him, and for the first time there was no argument in her eyes, only reluctant understanding. The bridge's comm system crackled to life. Kale 17's voice, calm, artificial yet somehow almost hesitant. "Captain Rourke, Dr. Vance, the encrypted message has been fully processed. There is an additional transmission." Vance's breath caught. From the ruins, a pause, then the AI's response. "No. From the coordinates in the recovered data." The words sent a shiver down his spine. Rourke straightened. Put it on screen. The display flickered, revealing a new set of symbols, this time unmistakably human in origin. And then, a voice. A voice that should not have existed. We tried to warn you. Static. Silence. Vance and Rourke exchanged a glance, and then, without another word, she sat down at the helm. Set a course, she said. Vance nodded. The Sagan's wake turned, engines igniting, propelling them toward the unknown, toward the next secret, toward the truth, and toward whatever was waiting for them in the dark.